as I understand it, at Amazon now, we've had a couple of attempts at unionization, one in Staten Island that worked, one in Bessemer, Alabama, right? Alabama, that didn't work. And what does that tell us? Like, what's happening? What's the bigger picture about what's happening here at Amazon?
Yeah, so I would answer that by way of, like you said, big picture first, then kind of winnowing down, right? Because I would say to folks watching and listening, right, that if you're trying to make sense of the sort of labor action that's happening right now, consider the fact that we just got two very clear examples of what workers are so pissed off about and why they're increasingly resorting to unionization efforts or kind of like ramping up militancy within the existing unions to fight these issues. The first that we kind of talked about a little bit earlier is the inflation problem, right? As I said, inflation grew 7% last year, already outpaced the average wage growth, which is around 4.7%. And so we're being told right now that it's the war, right? It's supply chain issues, or it's workers demanding higher wages that's driving up costs. But the very simple lie that more and more workers and consumers are seeing through right now is the fact that, you know, like on average, corporate profits hit a 70-year, the increase in corporate profits hit a 70-year high last year. And this is very much something that I heard from a lot of folks who were on strike last year. I'll give one example. We all remember the John Deere strike, or maybe you didn't hear about it, but 10,000 John Deere workers in multiple states went on strike last fall. And one of the things that they kept pointing to was like they had made that company more profitable than it had ever been in the very year that this strike was happening, the very year that the company was trying to take more from workers and push them into this two-tier wage system or even a three-tier wage system where future workers are going to get screwed over and everyone's going to gradually lose their benefits and their pay and so on and so forth. John Deere was trying to take more from its workers who had sacrificed and worked during a pandemic during its most profitable year on record. So like when that's the case, you as a worker are going to say, well, I'm getting gypped off here, right? And at the same time, this is not an aberration. We have CEOs and private equity fund managers on earnings calls bragging about seeing these record revenues, bragging about jacking up prices on all of us. And the list goes on and on. Exxon, BP, Kellogg's, which also experienced a strike last year, McDonald's, Amazon, whose business model has exploded over the course of the pandemic because more people are staying home, more people are ordering from Amazon. The amount that Amazon has grown over the past 2 years is truly astronomical. And yet, it is still pushing its workers to the brink. It is still treating them like robots. Like I was down there in Bessemer this time last year when the first union election vote was happening. And just because that first election failed and the pro-union votes were soundly defeated, doesn't mean all the issues that we were talking about regarding working conditions at Amazon just suddenly went away. They didn't. Does anyone remember at the end of last year, we had horrifying stories like an Amazon warehouse in Illinois that collapsed during a tornado. 6 workers died. And we later found out that Amazon managers were telling them to stay there, to keep working. They couldn't leave. They couldn't call their families. And now people are dead and they're never coming back, to say nothing of the workers, again, at Amazon who have been cycled in, broken down, and spat out. This is part of Amazon's business model. They have a turnover rate on average of 150%. And what I tell people is like, if your workers trying to organize your workplace in an Amazon facility that has 5,000, 6,000, 8,000 workers, that's like trying to organize a bathtub, because Amazon has made it so that you're constantly pouring in new workers while other workers are leaving because the work is so brutal and folks can hardly stay there long enough to recoup the benefits that Amazon touts as a good reason to work there, yada, yada, yada. And so the inflation thing, again, like when workers' wages and their demands for better pay and benefits, and they're told no at the same time that the companies they work for are raking in record profits and flying to space, like there's going to be a big disconnect there.
It's annoying. I understand
that. It's a bit annoying, right? And Christian Smalls, the president of the Amazon Labor Union, had a great quote where he said, after they successfully voted to unionize in Staten Island, he said, I want to thank Jeff Bezos for going to space, because while he was up there, we were down here organizing a union, right? And Jeff Bezos really spat in the face of his workers after he took his little, vanity space trip by saying, "Oh, I want to thank all the workers because you paid for this." Like, that is just such a callous way to, spit in the face of your workers who are peeing in bottles because they can't make it to the bathroom without getting, their records docked for taking time off task, so on and so forth. Amazon workers are heavily surveilled. We already know this, yada, yada, yada. So that sort of disconnect between corporate profits and, worker wages has been a big driving force throughout a lot of the strikes that we saw over the past year, right?
Let me
and
ask
the
you about
pandemic
numbers. Let me ask you some numbers, because this is what the other side says. My pals over at the National Review are, more conservative, and they were writing up about the Bessemer, Alabama facility where the unionization attempt failed, and they said, okay, these workers were not exactly on the fence when they were at last asked to vote on this question. More than 70% of the Amazon workers in Bessemer voted against forming a union chapter. They said the median pay there is between $15 and $20 an hour in the warehouses, with delivery drivers making around $70,000 a year and getting nice benefits. That is not big money compared to what a software developer makes at Amazon or anywhere else, but it is pretty good money compared to what workers typically make in warehouse jobs. So what are they missing?
Well, they're showing you only part of the fuller picture, right? Because as folks who were in the warehouse in Bessemer last year, and those who were still in it there, have been quick to point out, when Amazon's kind of outside consultants that they hired to essentially turn people against the union, when those consultants kind of make that same point, the workers can point directly to the statistics and say, well, like, yeah, in Bessemer, which is a deindustrialized town, majority black town that has twice the national poverty rate, around a $15, hourly wage for warehouse workers is higher than the average in that town. But in the greater Birmingham area, union workers doing similar work get paid on average $2 more, right? And so, like, it's if we're going to have a real discussion about this, we got to be honest and stop trying to treat workers like dupes, right? We got to show them that, like, actually there are, other people doing similar work to you who have different conditions. If you have all the facts and want to make that decision, have a union election, right? And I guess the other thing that I would say, because we can't push the defeat under the rug. However, we can point to the fact that the National Labor Relations Board deemed that Amazon had illegally tampered with that election, which is why workers at that facility in Bessemer have gotten a second shot at an election, right? That doesn't just happen. That happens when the actual agency that is charged with reviewing labor relations says, hey, this massive company broke the rules and tilted the chessboard in favor of itself against, its workers' desire to hold a union election. They deserve another shot. So there are a lot of factors.
I just think it's a good example that, like, if you don't, the whole thought about right to work states and so on was that it would give corporate America to do right by the workers. Like, you don't want to be told what to do by the unions. Do right by the workers, and you won't have to deal with this problem. And if you don't do right by the workers, things are going to go south. They are going to revolt at some point. And it just feels to me like we're seeing more and more of that. Of the corporations not doing right by the workers, not wanting to take care of their staff in the way they should. And I mean, I know you've been talking about Kroger. That's a great example. Now we're seeing Starbucks, big union push there. The numbers are, okay, Starbucks said quarterly profit jumped 31% at the end of last year to $816 million. That's amazing, per the New York Times. Meanwhile, more than 200 Starbucks locations across the country in some 30 states have filed petitions to organize, because the old trickle down doesn't seem to be happening outside of the coffee pot.
You're right. I mean, like, in the end, it really is that simple. Like, the trickle down theory was nice. It sounded good in principle. We have enough data to see now it didn't work. It didn't work for us, right? It worked for a very small few people, right? But for the vast amount of workers who, as I said, have been working longer, working harder, and been more productive over the past half century, and yet have seen the majority of their wages stagnate as the cost of living continues to go up. We've gone the longest period in American history without raising the federal minimum wage, and all the while the fruits of that productivity are getting pocketed by, shareholders and CEOs and so on and so forth. Starbucks, as you mentioned, is having this kind of really incredible sort of unionization effort, a grassroots bottom-up effort at the very moment that, it recorded 31% profit increase last quarter. And Kevin Johnson, the CEO, had a massive increase in pay to $20.4 million in 2021 before resigning. And now CEO Howard Schultz is back in there. So again, you're seeing people say like, okay, from inflation to COVID policies that we had no say over whatsoever, we've lost coworkers who have died. How can we ever measure it like that? Or how come we got no say over when we reopened or any of that? We were just told to go back to work, to shut up, to be happy with what we were given, at the same time that like our companies praised us as essential in the public facing realm, but they didn't actually treat us like we were essential on the shop floor. So there's a really big problem there, and workers are saying we've had enough of it.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.